Hello everyone, my name is Melissa and today is one of the most exciting days that there are throughout the season because today is the very first garden tour. It's June 6th, 2021 and welcome to Granted Gardens. Throughout this past year, we've actually gained a lot of subscribers. So I want to make sure that we're able to introduce ourselves again and introduce you guys to the garden again. Obviously, every single year, the garden looks a little bit different because we learn from things that we've done before. We try to tweak things and we always try to make it better the year after. So today, I'm going to walk you through part of the garden. We've added on quite a bit. So I think that we're going to try and release multiple sections of the garden every week instead of showing you everything all at once. Today we're going to start with the big section, so the raised beds and the in-ground gardens. This is kind of, I think, one of my favorite places to be. There's always so much stuff going on in here, and once it gets grown, it's just absolutely beautiful. So I think that this is a highlight. This is what we're known for. More is this garden section, so we'll start here today. One thing that I think I've improved on a lot is spacing and not necessarily trying to cram a bunch of things in one place. That's something that Tyler, my other half, which will be joining us here shortly, he has been on me about for the last couple of years. I tend to get a little excited about plants and I want all of the things. So I tend to cram them all into small spaces, which at the end of all of it isn't worth it because there's just not enough room for them to grow. Plants are constantly competing for root space and for nutrients. You're just gonna end up stunting your plants. You're not gonna end up getting as much fruit from them. So there really isn't much of a point. So this bed here is one that I have been notorious for cramming full of random things. So this year I tamed myself. One thing that I really wanted to focus on this year was peppers. Peppers are something that we use a lot in a lot of our meals. So I wanted to make sure I had a decent variety, and peppers are also something that tend to do very well here. We are zone 7A, Maryland, and I don't know, peppers do well. So I figured this year we were really going more towards productivity and having enough food to put away. We wanted to start really focusing on that, making sure we're utilizing every inch of what we grow and that we're benefiting from it and potentially altering the grocery bill, right? So that was one thing I focused on, was peppers. I'm not going to go into every detail of what kind of peppers these are until they start producing, I think. Then I'll start kind of walking you through them because right now they all look the same. But this bed I decided to heavily dedicate to peppers. The situation here is that this bed does not get a ton of sun. In the morning it tends to be shaded by trees, and then in the afternoon, evenings, you can see here it's in shade. I've struggled to get anything to really do well here in the past. We had some success with like tomatoes last year, which was ironic, but I've really struggled with getting things to do well here. So I figured I was going to try and just do a pepper bed this year and see how it goes. All of these plants were started from seed. They started in the grow station in the basement and then were moved up to the greenhouse. They're very healthy. I'm very proud of that. They've come a long way. They've done really, really well. All of our starts this year have just turned out beautifully. So I've got some beans here along the arch. My pepper bed here, and then I have some Brussels sprouts. This is my first year ever trying Brussels sprouts, so I put a few Brussels sprouts here on the end. I'm hoping that they'll do okay because they aren't going to get direct sunlight, as I mentioned, but they tend to do okay in cooler temperatures. I wholeheartedly understand that there is a difference between doing better in cooler temperatures and doing better in shade, and anything that you're going to grow for food doesn't do well in shade. It requires full sun. So it's an experiment with the Brussels sprouts. I need to find something that will grow in this bed. because it's our largest in-ground or our largest raised bed, and we need to utilize this. So experiments per usual. Now, I did say that I tried to keep everything pretty well spaced and that I wasn't going to cram stuff in here. However, I did go through and put some onions down in between each of the rows. So not a ton, just a couple. I think there's like maybe 4 onions down each row. And again, I'm not trying to cram anything out. I'm just trying to utilize what we have. This past year has been crazy for everyone. And it's given me some time to kind of step back and look at what we have here and be just utterly grateful for every inch of space that we are able to use and we are able to turn into a little piece of our dream. I cannot tell you how calming and happy coming home to a place like this is. Being able to come out into the garden or come out onto the patio and just unwind and let loose. God has blessed us, and this entire space is just an absolute blessing. I think that it's great that every single year we're able to learn something new and we're able to build and grow and do better the year next. But there's nothing like having this kind of an opportunity to learn where we are, to start where we are. And I am just amazed every single time that I step out here. This here is my prized tomato bed. Things did so absolutely well last year. I didn't change a thing other than the varieties of the tomatoes that were growing. As I mentioned, I will get into varieties later down the road. If you guys have specific questions or if you really want to know, let me know and I'll make sure I add in the comments. But I've got my tomato bed here. I've got some basil, different types of basil, Italian basil and purple basil in between. And I've started pruning. I can probably come back out here and prune again because they have just gotten so big. And we've been having a lot of rain recently, so I'm sure that that has something to do with it. I've done a ton of different videos on my tomatoes, how I prune them, how I plant them. I think there was just a recent video out the last couple weeks of me actually planting one of these bad boys. So if you have any questions, I will link those videos below to give you kind of an idea of how I take care of and plant my tomatoes. Those processes are important because the more that you tend to your tomatoes, the more you prune them, proper planting, proper care will result in a better harvest. So they're worth learning and they're worth doing. I'll make sure I link a couple videos here. These are peas. I can tell you exactly what these are. These are my sugar snap peas. I have grew these very, very well a couple years ago. They did awesome. And then last year I could not get them to grow for the life of me, so I'm hoping that these ones survive. It's starting to get really hot though, so we'll see. I brought back the flower pots here, which I absolutely love. I think it provides a little pop of color in the garden, and then the bees absolutely love them. So it invites in pollinators. We'll take it. Some cabbages in some buckets. These are Tyler's beans, which are doing stellar. They're doing absolutely beautiful. And Tyler's tomatoes. So if you're new to our channel, we have 3 arches in our garden that are usually the most beautiful thing, I think, of everything that we have in the garden. So choosing what to plant on those arches every year is not easy. We have been studying and we've been seed searching and we have found so many things that I think will just do beautifully on arches. But it's so hard to finally pick when it comes time to plant what you're planting on the arches. So I've showed you already, we've done beans and peas over here, which were a given. And once I go into more detail with them, keep your eye out for upcoming videos on what kinds of beans those are. I think you guys will all absolutely love it. But this last arch that enters from the raised bed section of the garden into the in-ground garden, I struggled with this arch because I had so many things I wanted to put on it and I just wasn't sure what I was going to pick. So I'll show you what I finally decided on. I also got really excited during planting day. I think I know what kind of squash these are. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. It might be a surprise squash. I'm fairly confident I know what it is though, and I believe that these are the crookneck squash. So I've got 2 plants here growing along the arch that will go up. They're healthy, they're doing great, they're climbing, they're putting out their little tendrils, they're flowering, so I'm excited for those. And I think they'll look really pretty with the squash hanging off of the trellis here, off the arch. One other thing that we have stepped our game up a bit with this year is fruit. Okay, so once we had the entire garden of this section planned out, I realized that I wasn't growing any fruit. I had done melons last year, a couple different types of melons, Kajari and tiger melons, and I liked them for breakfast, but they weren't Tyler's favorite. And so I asked him, I said, "Well, if you could grow a fruit in the garden, what would you like to grow?" And he said, "Watermelon." And I was like, well, I don't know about full-blown watermelons, but I actually learned of a new watermelon, sugar baby watermelons, and they're smaller, more personal sized. So I said, why don't we try those? We were able to go to a plant swap, a local plant swap, and some kind friends of ours made sure that we came home with some sugar baby watermelons. So 2 of them are what's on this other side of the arch here. So those are our sugar baby watermelons. They're still tiny, they haven't grabbed onto anything yet, but they'll do just well growing up the side of the arch. I'm gonna mix it up a little bit because I want Tyler to be with me when I do the other side. But we've got some new stuff and the sun's finally setting, so the chickens came out. I'm gonna show you guys the chickens. So this chicken coop at this time last year was brand spanking new. Our chickens looked still very little. They were, I think, in their like teenage phase, like awkward, weird phase. But they're full grown now, happy as can be, producing eggs. We get anywhere from 6 to 7 eggs a day. We've got 8 chickens, 1 is a male, so we got a rooster. So obviously we have nailed the concept of starting from seed with the grow station that Tyler built in the basement. We are knocking it out, like it's perfect. We now had the greenhouse. This was our first time being able to utilize the greenhouse for this phase of growing from seed and then moving them out and then transferring them to the garden. So that saved us a ton of space and made it much more possible for more plants to survive because they had somewhere to go, which meant that we ended up with a boatload of plants, right? And we were really trying to utilize the space that we have. And so we decided that this year we were gonna try planting along the fence line of the garden. So the setback to that is the whole reason why we have a fence in the garden is because critters eat our food, right? So there's a good chance we could lose the large majority of the stuff that's growing on the fence line. But at this point we had extra plants and we're willing to gamble a bit. So this is the fence line that I'm talking about that goes around the garden. I've had some herbs and flowers and stuff here before, so that's not new. But what is new is I've got 2 squash plants here. I got excited when we were planting and forgot to label them, so I'm not entirely sure what these are. I believe they're winter squash. I don't remember though. But we've got these 2, so surprise squash here along the fence line. Moving on down here, These are our loofahs. So last year I grew loofahs on that arch. And so this year we figured we would let them grow along the side here of the fence line. I think it'd be really beautiful. They're gonna take up this fence and they're gonna be all viney and beautiful with their leaves, and I'm excited. The loofahs that I grew last year, I had 2 that went up on that arch that I just showed you. When everything was said and done, we ended up with 1 good loofah that I could actually cut up and use. I was really disappointed. I might have not picked them soon enough, I guess, maybe, and they may have froze outside and then they got mushy. I don't know. If someone's got insight for loofah on how to like best do this year, I would appreciate your input. So this year we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loofah plants. So they should fill in pretty nicely along this fence line. For those of you that may not know what I'm talking about, loofahs, like the spongy things that you sometimes like may use in the shower, a lot of people I've seen use them to like wash their dishes with. A lot of people think that they come from the ocean, that they're some kind of like sea creature. They're not. They're a plant. And they're really cool to grow because they can get really, really big. The vines alone are just gorgeous. The flowers are beautiful, but it's fun to be able to pick them and then you can use them for different things. Initially I was planning on putting mine in soaps, and then I wanted to be able to use them as scrubbies in the kitchen as like a green option for scrubbing dishes. But like I said, I only got 1. So I'm hoping this year we'll do better. Now, we didn't plant anything here because I know that I've got black-eyed Susans and some other flowers that come up here by themselves. So we're kind of hoping that they come back. But over here, I ended up doing more beans because we had them and I didn't want them to just die and go to waste. So I put them here. Everyone else that starts their plants from seed must understand the struggle. When you start a bunch of plants and you care for them for months and months and months, and then you don't have enough room to plant them all, what do you guys do with them? I got to the point where I've been giving them away to friends. We sold some. We sold quite a few actually, but what do you do? I've been thinking about maybe just putting them in the woods and just letting them go, but I know they'll never make it. The deer will eat them first. Another garden that was a dream of mine to have was an herb bed, and Tyler built this for me I think about 2 years ago, and we've just been adding to it. I've been blown away with how much stuff has just come back by itself this year. Some overwintered just fine, some of them just reseeded itself, but I want to give you guys a quick glimpse of the herb bed. As I mentioned earlier, a big goal for us this year is to put up as much as we possibly can. The herb bed has been a lot of fun because during times when we've just got baby plants that aren't really producing any kind of vegetables, we can pick from the herb bed and do stuff here. So one of the first things I did once the plants started coming up in here and they were big enough was to start picking stuff and dehydrating it. We have a dehydrator. I just plug that bad boy in, fill it up with herbs, and just let it run. And it was running nonstop for probably about a week and a half. With that, we were able to put up a ton of herbs. One of them here, can you see? The oregano. Now these, we've got some taller shoots here. This was about the size that all of this was, but I literally took up a bunch of it and went ahead and started dehydrating. Another one was this marjoram. Same concept. It was really tall. I cut it back and started dehydrating. I'll probably do a video here once this comes back up again on how to properly cut and harvest your herbs. Some of this chamomile overwintered. The rest of it we started from seed and put in here, and it's been doing beautifully. I've been picking from this and drying it. One of my most favorite teas is chamomile tea, so I wanted to make sure we had plenty this year. Last year I had started a ton of chamomile from seed, and for some reason I only kept like 1 or 2 plants, and the 1 or 2 plants did not produce enough to sustain me and my love for tea over the winter. So I ended up running out. So this year I was dead set on making sure I planted a ton of chamomile, and so far so good. I always thought that you needed to give plants a ton of space. We've had this conversation earlier in this video, but when it comes to herbs, and especially chamomile, you can kind of plant them pretty close together and they'll do just fine. These ones here, I would say there's probably 6 or 7 plants right there next to each other, so they do just fine and you get a decent harvest that way. 1 or 2 plants really didn't get me very far. Another thing that I'm just absolutely in awe of is this thyme. It's just so beautiful. It has just taken off this year. I love how it's like starting to kind of pour over the walkway. I've had to trim some, I've dehydrated some of the thyme, but I took a chunk from here, you can tell, but you can it hardly made a dent in this plant. It's gorgeous. So as promised, here is the handsome man behind Granted Gardens to show you more of what we got going in the big garden.
All right, so this is the in-ground section. We've got a volunteer kohlrabi that's actually doing pretty good. He's about the size of maybe a golf ball. Another kohlrabi, just scattered. We've got cucumbers along the back wall here with some lean-to trellising. Some okra right here, an okra right there, a weed right here. And these are celery, these little guys in between. And then over here we have regular beets, like the purple kind, the ones, well, maybe red, whatever you're used to. These right here and here are all Chinese red meat radishes, and then more beets over here. We've got a whole row of onions going back. We've got some more kohlrabi that I direct seeded. Well, I'm not sure if that's gonna come up. All we really have is a few little scattered guys. We've got 2 Napa cabbages here and here. Beans along the back. That's a volunteer potato and one of Melissa's sunflowers.
All right, so now we're gonna move over to another in-ground section. The food forest is what we call it, and it's been something that we've been adding to a lot. It started off with pawpaws and turned into quite a food forest.
Yes. All right, so if you've seen this section before, it probably looks a little bit more dense than it usually does. But we've still got the comfrey up in the front, which are these broadleaf guys, and these guys that are actually flowering like this. These still are the ones that just travel through their roots and spread. They don't actually go to seed, which is great. I've already harvested this once, but it looks like it's about time to harvest it again. Back here, we've got 2 of the pawpaws on this side, here and here. On the other side, we have 2 more. Then back here, all these tall guys right here, this is all St. John's wort. You can see it's starting to flower. We'll actually harvest this, the flowers only. And then once we get a good portion of them, we're actually gonna chop all of it down, let it get some air. This in the middle is a goji berry. And then back here on the ground, little spindly guys. Those are also goji berries. These are fartichokes, otherwise known as Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes. And then this is a hardy kiwi. Behind me on the bottom is another hardy kiwi, and there's another hardy kiwi over there. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 little baby fig trees. They were done as cuttings, so you can see they have a big stalk at the bottom, but they're actually doing pretty good. These figs probably will not be staying here. They're just here temporarily until we can find a better place, but they'll take a while to get big. And then we've got 1 elderberry over there.
So that's it for today. We're gonna make sure that we take you through step-by-steps the rest of the gardens here at Granted Gardens. We have added a ton of stuff this year, which will probably end up being a video all in itself, but we've got some really exciting things to show you guys. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and we look forward to sharing more with you soon.